I read a great quote in the New York Times, it so rings true for me. I always end with the sound because if yoga's stairs to meditation, sound is an elevator.
The big question is this: how do we take a seemingly ordinary world and make it beyond extraordinary? In yoga, there is so much more than meets the eye, and it's not just the things we do on our yoga mats that make the biggest difference. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name is Austin Bitsis, and welcome to Life as a Secret Yogi. So we have Michelle Berlin on the show today, and she's the founder of Yogi Shelly, and both an experienced yoga teacher and businesswoman. Super happy and thankful to have you, Michelle, on the show today. So welcome to Life as a Secret Yogi yoga podcast. And thank you for joining me today to talk about your life as a secret yogi, covering topics around staying happy and healthy during traveling, once, of course, traveling resumes, and bringing the lessons we learn in yoga out into the real world. So how are you doing today, Michelle?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your time. And so our audience are those that want to take the practice of yoga, meditation, breath work, energy work, among other related tools into the real world. It's a lot of people who are looking to perform at a higher level in other disciplines, such as running, golf, surfing, basketball, art, music, entrepreneurship, and so on. So simply, it's really those who just want to make life beautiful. And it might just be in simply daily life and or in a specific discipline. The audience does not necessarily have a desire to become the stereotypical yogi or yoga teacher. Nevertheless, the audience would like to utilize the tools of yoga and meditation among other related tools to, like I said, make life beautiful. And in short, the message of the secret yogi is that we all have this heroic self, our inner source that we cultivate through the tools of yoga to make a seemingly ordinary world extraordinary. It's that we all have this superhero that lives within, and yoga, meditation, breath work, and similar practice allows us to tap into these quote, quote, superpowers. And our superpowers being mindfulness, awareness, love, focus, and really creating happiness from within. And those are just to list a few, but it's ultimately just to also feel good in a body that we love. So it's a long introduction, but I would love to kind of dive now into your story, into how you became a wellness professional. And I use the term wellness professional because you do a lot more than just teach yoga. And I know your story has a pivotal moment with a serious injury. And I'd love for you to take us back a little before that and what happened and how it kind of shifted your journey in life.
Yeah, sure. So when I was in college, I was doing the normal college thing, partying, studying, not living such a healthy lifestyle as I am now. And right before I was going to study abroad in Australia, I was on the Garden State Parkway, which I'm sure you know well, being from Jersey. And I was stopped at a toll going to the airport, actually. And I was rear-ended by a drunk driver. It was a hit and run. Like, I was at a dead stop paying the toll, so my head was turned, and he hit me at like 50 miles an hour, and my trunk just like ended in my like almost at my front seat. So it was a pretty, it was a really bad accident. I had my seatbelt on, but I snapped a few vertebrae in my neck. Of course, I got like a bruise from the seatbelt, like a cut. My low back, my neck, my shoulder, everything was just, destroyed. I herniated discs in my low back. My whole body just was, jolted from this. And I delayed my travel to Australia, but me being like the stubborn, girl that I am, I was like, I still want to go. So went to the hospital. There was like nothing much you could do for cracked vertebrae in the neck. You have to get an MRI for the, check out what's going on, what else is going on in your body. So they put me in a neck brace. I flew to Australia and I started doing physical therapy there. But I was in really bad shape. Like I was not walking without pain. I was constantly in pain. I wasn't sleeping. And on top of that, I was still in college and I was studying abroad and I was ignoring my injuries and just partying and, doing a lot of stupid things I shouldn't have been doing, surfing and, ego. But it just, my pain in my body just kept getting worse and worse. And so finally, when I got back to the States, they were like, look, you have 3 herniated discs in your low back. It seems like you need surgery. So I went to 2 different doctors to get an opinion, and they wanted to do a spinal fusion. And at that point, I gained a lot of weight. I was pretty miserable. Like I couldn't walk or wake up in the morning or even go to bed at night without being in excruciating pain. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. I'm 21. I'm like, I don't want to get back surgery. So I started to explore yoga, and I found, a teacher that I really connected with, who later on became my business partner at our studio. And I was practicing, slowly and integrating the practices at my own pace. And it was a vinyasa class. Like I feel like vinyasa or power yoga is kind of like the gateway drug to all yoga.
Yeah.
But then I thought, I need to go to the source. So I decided to go to India, and I studied at the Himalayan Iyengar Institute, and I took a training there, and it really like slowed me down and took everything pose by pose. Like it wasn't like, it was just so different than, yoga in the States that we know, like fast pace and moving through all the vinyasas and chaturangas. And it wasn't a sweaty practice, but it was a practice that I so needed to realign my body and get healthy and get strong and integrate the pranayama and the meditation, all the mind practices to help heal the body. And after a few months, I was feeling amazing. So I really gravitated towards a more gentle Hatha Yoga Iyengar practice. And I still teach like that because it's what helped me. And I think it's probably one of the more intelligent, safer practices. So like, when a beginner says, oh, I want to try yoga, like I would never say, oh, go do power yoga for the first time.
Yeah.
Because
They just throw you right into it.
yeah, it can be, and throwing your body around without any awareness and mindfulness, like you're twisting and turning your body. And it's, you could, and that's why there's like, sometimes yoga gets a bad rap. They're like, oh, I got hurt in yoga. Like that should not be happening in a yoga practice if done correctly, So yeah, so my journey started there. And then from there, I was teaching. I had a studio for many years and closed that a few years ago, and really continued studying in different countries, was led to Nepal, where I practiced and studied sound healing with a 5th generation sound monk up in the Himalayas. It was amazing. So I'm integrating it all. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome story. And I would love to later on kind of dive more into you started kind of talking about, like the differences between how we practice yoga and how yoga is more traditionally practiced. And also kind of the aspect of how you shifted from kind of overcoming your injuries and then wanting to kind of dive in more into learning more and extended your learning, but also shifting that mindset. Was there some type of like purpose you were kind of driven by, that saying like, hey, I want to teach this to other people that are going through something similar? You're kind of like trying to find your purpose in terms of your teachings and becoming a teacher, or?
It just kind of of course, I had no interest in teaching at first. My main goal was just to heal and to get better and, collect all of these tools. And then I just, when I did start to teach, I don't know if like the universe gave me these students, but they were all like, so many people suffer from back pain. A lot of different pain, but for some reason, I feel like just even now, people sitting all day at the computer and I really, really have a lot of compassion and empathy for people that just suffer with back pain. It occupies so much space in your mind and it's just not a way to live. So I really did have a passion and wanted to take those teachings forward, that there is a way out, or at least you can use these practices as a daily painkiller, I like to say. Because even if I kind of slip on my practice and I don't practice every day or every week, my body will start to get achy again. But I like to think of my practice as a daily painkiller. So instead of going for like the prescription drugs, I go for the practice. And
Yeah, one without side
yeah,
effects.
yeah,
Only
yeah.
positive side effects. Yeah, no,
It's,
I love how you put that and how you kind of reframe that around like it's a daily painkiller in that terms. And we have similar stories. I mean, mine wasn't an incident, but mine was kind of self-induced in terms of I was a collegiate runner and
mm,
I had a really serious hip flexor pain I was dealing with over a year. It became chronic, and I thought it was just something I had to deal with. But I
mm-hmm,
knew if I just kept trying different things, eventually I would find something. And that's kind of where I found yoga, and the only thing
mm,
that had a long term fix to my pain, where a
mm-hmm.
lot of things going to specialists and everything was great. I mean, it helped, but it was only a temporary fix to a chronic problem. So I love how you
Right.
kind of put
Yeah.
that in shift the mind instead of popping that ibuprofen. Want to do something with positive side effects and
Right.
yeah. And are there any positions or opinions over your journey and your story that you just shared that changed or shifted substantially, maybe in the past couple years?
Yeah. I really believe, and I know that there's so many different types of yoga. Now there's like so many styles. Like it's so confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, people are taking the practices, rebranding it, putting their twist on it, and you're like, you don't even know what is what. Like, what is going on here? But I really think it would just simplify it. You really actually to make your body feel good, even if you're not in pain and you just want to, if you're a runner or you're, like you said, in some kind of other athlete, just keep it simple. Like, you don't need a lot of posturing. You don't need a lot of like deep twisting stretches and all this like intent. Like, yoga is not like a CrossFit or Barry's boot camp. It's, I think, keeping it simple and just keeping the classical postures is enough. Yoga's already perfect as it is. We don't need to add weights or add whatever else people add. I think, just like my mom always says, she has this saying, like, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Just keep
I
it
love that
simple.
saying.
Yeah. So true with the practice as well. So
Yeah. And you teach everything from yoga to sound therapy to sound healing to Thai yoga body work to breath work and
mhm. Yeah.
meditation.
Mhm.
Are there any other modalities that you particularly use? I know keeping it simple, but in terms of the yoga practice, but other modalities that you use for healing, either in your own practices or your students' practices?
You know what I really love? I don't teach it, but I love the Wim Hof method.
Yeah, we've actually been
Are you,
speaking to that a little bit on some upcoming episodes that will be launched by the time this episode launches. Yeah, it's a great thing. I mean, you could
yeah.
share more about it.
Yeah, I mean, the cold therapy. I mean, it's because it combines, it's the breath work,
Mhm.
and then just cultivating a lot of energy in your body, and the heat, and then you go into an ice bath. I know it sounds like torture to some people to go in an ice bath for 3 to 5 minutes, but it's amazing. And it's also like a mind game. I have a very good friend in Miami that runs the Miami Ice Club, and he studied with Wim Hof himself. So I love it. And your body feels so great. I mean, there's tons of benefits, which I'm sure in the next episode but I utilize that. I love it. I'm into it. It's
Yeah, that's
great.
awesome. I love cold therapy, and it's funny that we started speaking about this on other episodes, but also this episode because it's like it's something that as a runner, even in at a high level in high school and in college, it was just something we did. Like after a hard workout or
Mm.
on a recovery day, we would jump in the ice bath, and it's all about breath work, staying calm, and you're there with your friends, and you're just trying to stay cool, calm, and collective. Well, staying cool is not hard, but staying
Yeah.
but yeah, staying collective is another story, and you get used to it, and you really practice. Your mind's training your mind's like training a muscle, so
For
it's great.
sure.
And so the idea of bodying our innate secret yogi is that we utilize these different modalities, as we just spoke about, or tools, as we call them, to unlock our quote unquote superpowers to make a seemingly ordinary world extraordinary. In your
Mhm.
opinion, how do these different tools in combination work together? So, if you're working with a student, for example, and you're doing traditional yoga practice
Mhm.
and kind of fusing together some sound therapy, how do these kind of work together?
Sure. Yeah. So most of my like the private work that I do, and even in group classes, I mean, I don't go anywhere without like a sound bowl or some kind of sound instrument. I love it. Um, which is such a useful tool because in the yoga, the posturing component, we address the physical body. So like the first layer, and, we're working on our muscles and our tissues and our joints. And then of course, with the breath work, we're working on our energetic system, our nervous system, and the sound. I read a great quote in the New York Times, which is, it so rings true for me. I always end with the sound because if yoga's stairs to meditation, sound is an elevator. So I feel like giving people that space to drop in with these certain tools and sound bowls and hand pans and all these other things that I use, it one has a great calming effect, but it also kind of distracts them because I feel like you just tell like a new, someone who's just stepping on their mat to meditate, like just the thought or the saying meditation, like, oh, I can't meditate, I can't even sit still for 2 seconds, or I'm thinking all the time. But the sound does something. It puts people in such a calm, relaxed state. Like right away you hit it and people are just like gone, they're in it. So it's always like the cherry on top for me, the sound component of the practice. And I always leave like a really long, like maybe 20 to 25 minutes for the sound at the end of like an hour practice. But they all go so well together. And at the end of the day, really the sound is part of Nada yoga, which is like, the yoga of sound, which focuses more on the internal sounds that you hear with meditation and some chanting. But, the sound of a Tibetan bowl or a crystal bowl, it produces the same vibration as like if we were chanting Om. So all of these sounds are very high frequency, high vibrational sounds that can induce a state of meditation through the overtones and the harmonics and brain entrainment. So it's like a fast track to getting the mind fertile for meditation.
Yeah, definitely. I love the way you put that. And I love to unpack that a little bit more. And in terms of, I know for my own personal practice, I love sound baths because I have a very active mind and it allows me,
Mm,
like you said, it's like the elevator to be able to do meditation, which is
mm-hmm,
the practice of non-doing. And for a lot of people, I mean, including myself, it's hard and it's
mm-hmm,
not easy with somebody who has a very active mind. And we all really have very active minds and can
mm-hmm,
relate. And I'd love to hear your opinion on this. So, with another guest of ours, Mikkel Biker, we spoke about
mm-hmm,
these almost like pillars, where for somebody, say, with an active mind, it starts with doing something very active. So that might be going for a run. And it's kind of a
mm-hmm,
distraction method, but you know what?
mm-hmm,
It allows us to kind of have the breaks in between the thoughts. And then you
mm-hmm,
go to something slightly more subtle, which is like a breathing technique, maybe a
mm-hmm.
physical breathing technique, and then even a more subtler breathing technique. And then it would be meditation, which is the act of non doing. And it sounds like sound bath or using sound is almost like it almost goes around that where it's like a trick almost in between going between like a subtle method of like a breathing technique and meditation and allows you just to kind of hone in that frequency. And you use
Yeah.
different sound methods like you just mentioned before. I also have seen that you know how to play the hand pan, which is also like a beautiful sound. Like what's your opinion on that kind of like those levels?
Well, I think it definitely makes sense to me. And I guess if you're asking like as far as like the pillars, like you take somebody that's never meditated before and you give them something more active to do, and then, and then start them in, like ease them in with breath work. But I do think that sound is accessible for everybody right away, especially if they're laying
True.
down. Yeah. But I think I mean, there is like once in a while, like very hyperactive people. Sometimes it takes them some time and active meditation. I mean, I consider running like an active meditation, and then you
Mhm.
do have active meditations like the Osho meditations. But yeah, I think sound would fall right after that breath work and meditation. But I think it's definitely easier for people to do because really you just got to lay down and surrender. And everybody can at least lay down. The surrendering part might be challenging at first, but it's not like as intimidating as, like my mom. She's like, oh, I can't do yoga, because she sees like all these Instagram people and Lululemons putting their leg behind their head. So there's like that image, but everybody can enjoy sound. Like it's not, there's no really level of experience you need just to listen.
That's true. And for everybody listening right now, if you have trouble meditating or it seems very intimidating, I think sound bath's like a perfect way to be able to kind of get into meditation. And so if you haven't tried it, give it a try. And there's so many different types of sound baths and frequencies for different things. And so the next thing that I wanted to talk about was something actually on the front page of your website. And it's yoga is a work in and not a workout. And it's a quote, like I said, right in front of the homepage of your website, yogishelly.com, for all who want to check it out. And I'd love to talk more about this misconception that yoga is simply stretching or stretching in a hot room. And then if you like scroll down, I'm going to quote you again on your website. I just love how you put it. So through yoga, we become present, not perfect. You will uncover that yoga has many dimensions that activate your energy, not only keep the body in shape. It is the ultimate tool for enhancing human potential and functioning at the highest peak of the body and mind. And I couldn't agree more with you. And would you be able to elaborate on this concept a little bit more?
Yeah. So really, when we're posturing, if we go back to, 13th century yoga texts, all of the asanas that were mostly seated, they were not really with the intention to stretch anything. What they were was like putting your body in different shapes that, like, you're making a body mudra in a sense. So if you can picture like, a Buddha statue with the thumb and the pointer finger together, like meditating, that's a mudra, like a hand mudra. But all of these Hatha yoga postures were considered energetic mudras. So when you put your body in this different form, it would shift the way the energy would move in the body. And, they all had different purposes. And there's a word called like the vayus, the way that the energy moves in the body. And they would create like a different way that the energy could flow and open up different channels and blockages. So it's all to work on this container that we've been given so we can raise our consciousness to be able to meditate. I mean, the whole point of yoga is to be able to sit in contemplation or meditation to realize our highest potential. So yes, it has shifted to more of a workout, or like boot camp style yogas are very popular now. I don't like them, but it's not for me. But I get it too. Like I see their purpose. Like a lot of people are like, oh, like, even some guys like, oh, I don't know, yoga's for girls, which is so funny because, in India, and yoga was only practiced by men, and still mostly only practiced by men. Like the sadhus and the Nagababas, they're all men. The spiritual aspirant were men. So in the West, it's like mostly women practicing. And there's this misconception that like you have to be flexible to do yoga, which is no, if you're not flexible, yoga is actually for you. A lot of the postures are really set up and designed to open the front of the body, also for pranayama. That's why some of the sequences that we use like later on is, we end with like some back bending, because it's really to prepare the body to be able to breathe for pranayama, for the breathing practices. So I think if we can shift our approach of how we practice, instead of like saying, oh, I'm not flexible, my hamstrings are so tight, like people automatically judge. And then if you ever come to my class, there's always the beginner that comes in and they want to go all the way to the back of the room because it's intimidating, I guess. But I think if you approach it with, okay, I'm just going to make different shapes with my body, and I got to, breathe into these shapes. And, the moment you feel like intensity or, you're really stretching deep, I think when you go too far to the active, the ha, which is the sun, the tha, which is the moon. So that's like the hatha yoga. It's all about the balance. So you don't want to be too active and too forceful with the practice. You got to keep it balanced. So I think always approach it more, being more gentle with yourself, so you can create space in the body. So that's what we're trying to do. And then that in turn create space in the mind. But when we force things and we become rigid and we, do yoga at 120 degrees and, it feels just forceful to me. And that's just my opinion. I know a lot of people love, and that's like their gateway drug, and then they go deeper.
Yeah. And that's actually something I was sorry to cut you off right there, but that was actually something that I was going to ask you, which was when I first heard of that, I had the same, and I still do, where I believe kind of like what you said, what yoga truly is. And at the same time, it opened my eyes up to why these physical practices of yoga are also important in their own ways. One, something that just has come to me from like talking to a lot of different people on the show is that sometimes these physical practices, exactly like you said, are like the gateway drug. And that's what got me in. It healed my body physically. I trusted it with my body. And then I realized it's so much more. And then I got into the deeper meaning of it. And two was that it allows, if somebody is only going to practice a little bit of yoga, that's better than practicing no yoga. However, the caveat of exactly what you said, if you're forcing your body too much and it leads to injury or the opposite of what yoga truly is supposed to do, even on the physical side, because the asanas are really just so we could, like you said, so we could meditate. And if they're not able to do that and they make us more injured than when you started, then so it's just a fine line between like introducing, and also another caveat is like it is intimidating. Like when you get thrown into a power yoga class and it's hot and it's sweaty and you're inches away from somebody else, who knows if that's still going to happen anymore. I mean, if you ever take a class in New York City, you literally sweat on the other person. It's kind of gross, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen again. But it's very intimidating for somebody that has never practiced yoga, and they just throw you right in. There's no introduction, there's no nothing, and you could go at your own pace. But I mean, it's still very intimidating. So there's so many levels, and you could have a debate for hours on like, is it right, is it not? But I love to hear everyone's opinion on it. And there's really no right answer.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it does have its purpose. It appeals like that, getting the workout in, like and also if we think about what yoga was designed, like for like the wandering sadhus in the Himalayas, they were walking all day. They abandoned all their possessions, no homes, and they would go meditate in the Himalayas, in the forest. They were walking. So they really needed just the seated asanas to sit and meditate in. So they did a few of those asanas. But now if we think about how the modern world is affecting us, most of us, not me, but we're sitting all day. Like I could never be a 9 to 5 on the computer type person. And man, the people that do, I give them credit, because it's sitting all day is very taxing on the body. So they go to a class and, okay, well, we're going to sit for an hour after work. Like they'd be like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. I was just sitting for 9 hours, so it does make sense. Like the vinyasa and the power yoga and the more faster practices attract those types of people in and get them in. And then I think like it happens to all of us. Like we're like, oh wait, this is like, I'm starting to feel better. My emotions are better. I'm having better conversations with friends and family. But in the beginning, it does kind of strike the ego. Like I even remember I was just obsessed with doing handstands when I first started. I was, 15, 20 years ago. I was
Been
like,
there.
oh, yeah. And now I don't really care. I don't care about, like, not that I don't care about the asana chasing anymore. I wanted to be able to put my leg behind my head. And I'm thinking, for what? Like, why? Why do I need to do this posture? I don't feel good when I do it. I'm already at a point where I can do a few postures. I know what my body needs, and I'm able to sit comfortably in meditation. So why am I going to push myself to do crazy posture? What? To like look cool on Instagram? Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care anymore, and it's inspiring. I mean, I'm not trying to knock those that do. It's inspiring to see that. Like, you're like, wow, I think it's inspiring, but also can be intimidating for people. Like, well, I can't do that. I can't go to yoga. So I would never want people to, scroll through Instagram yogis and be put off to not
Yeah.
trying the practice.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, I love handstands and I think it's great. And I also think if you've been working on a pose for a long time, you want to show it off on Instagram, that's amazing. But you also don't, it's like this funny balance between like what people think yoga is from like just
Hmm.
scrolling on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, and
Hmm.
what yoga truly is. And on one end of the spectrum, it gets people from other disciplines into yoga. They're like, oh, wow, I didn't know yoga can be this physical and be this workout
Hmm.
for the body and the mind. That's that's great. And the other end, it could be where it's super intimidating and it pushes people off. Say, "Hey, yoga's not for me. I'm not flexible. I can never do yoga." And
Hmm.
it's like, no,
Hmm.
yoga's perfectly for you. Or
Hmm.
maybe yoga's not. They see maybe just a lot of females
Uh-huh.
on Instagram, and they're like, "Oh, yoga's not for men." And
Hmm.
then they kind of scroll and they see somebody like a Dylan Werner or a Patrick Beach, and they're like very popular yogis that are men, and they have a very physical practice. They have a very good physique, all from yoga. And they're like, wow, maybe it is for men. And now they kind of get started down their journey. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's so many sides to it. And
Yeah.
I love your perspective, because you spent time in India and you definitely have a deeper understanding and seeing the differences of yoga in the East compared to the West, and how
Hmm.
it kind of morphed and how we can find balance. I mean, the demands may be different in either culture. Are there
Hmm.
any recommended resources for somebody who wants to really dive deeper into the practice of yoga, say, like on this topic of like taking the learnings from the East and really diving into like what yoga truly is? Is there anything that you particularly used or use? Like there might be a
Hmm.
book or documentary, any
Yeah.
source of content or a website?
Yeah, you know who I love and who's so easy to listen to, and I consider him one of my teachers. I did a few trainings with him, and now he's like very popular. But Sat Guru. I mean, he looks like a guru. He's in the robes and everything, but he's so funny and he's so real, and he explains yoga in very simple terms and it makes sense. And he's a Kriya yogi, so mostly gentle movements with some breath work and meditation. So he's not teaching so many asanas, but he just you listen to him and you're like, I get it. And he talks about like working with the energies of your body. Forget about like the physical component. That's a bonus. Like, yes, you'll get in shape, you'll be healthier, but you're working with your energy. And he's really funny, and he's been asked to speak at the UN. He's did the Harvard commencement speech. I mean, he's a brilliant man, and he's gone head to head with some of the most brilliant minds and did talks at Google. So I love him. I think he's like one of the last real gurus left, and he's totally like with the pop culture too. Like I went to one of his conferences and his learning conferences, and he gives the mic to people to ask questions, and he gave the mic to somebody. He's like, come on, hold the mic like Lady Gaga. So he's with it. Like he knows what's up. But he looks like this, like, looks like a guru. He's like that kind of prototype that you would think, but he's very, very cool. And no ego, not like there's no spiritual ego there. Like, I know
Yeah.
all. I'm this like, and he's called the mystic, but he like says, I'm not mystical. Like, there's nothing mystical about this. This just do the practice. And he gives you very simple practices if you take his training. So I really like him, and his teachings. They resonate with me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that helps a lot. And I'll put his information in the show notes for everyone who wants to kind of dive deeper into his teachings. So
Mm-hmm.
you could check that out. And I definitely will check that out in more detail. And
Yeah.
yeah, any particular action items or advice for people that might have doubts about yoga,
Mm-hmm.
or saying like we were just using, saying, hey, yoga's not for me because I'm not flexible. And
Mm-hmm.
basically overcoming like what we talked about, where it's like, okay, I'll try power yoga, but it ends up because they're just not ready for it. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
fast practice and they might result in injury, and that might result in
Mm-hmm.
saying, hey, look, I wasn't flexible, I told you so, type of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of overcoming that. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
overcome not only self-limiting beliefs, but adversity to yoga? Like, would you have any advice for those people either
Yeah.
listening, and they're probably
Hmm.
not listening? It's honestly probably somebody that the person listening knows.
Yeah. I honestly, I think do your research. Like if you, I mean, again, like you said, who knows when studios will open, but I think if you're just starting, or even if like you want to, have something with more of a foundational practice, the styles to look for that are not intimidating is Iyengar, where you take it pose by pose with props and you really work on the alignment and the architecture of the body. And not to say it's not hard, it's you're holding poses for a longer time, but with support and with engagement in a very intelligent way. Like, Hatha yoga, if there's I mean, all these styles are Hatha, but generally when people like yoga studios market Hatha, tends to be a little bit more slow. And then I also teach and love yin yoga, which is very stagnant and very accessible. But again, these practices where you're holding postures a lot longer, they're challenging in a different way. But always just research the style. And then, Anusara is another great practice. I mean, it's like a more modern take on Iyengar, makes it more accessible. But I
Mhm.
think learning the different styles, if you're looking at like a schedule and you're like, well, what's Katona yoga and what's this yoga, that you like, just research into it before you just jump into a class, because you never want to go in and think like, oh, I have to keep up and I have to keep going. Like you don't. Again, it's not a boot camp, but I think look for those styles. They will better accommodate, a safer practice and journey in, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice. There's so many different styles of yoga. Like I remember when I got started, I knew there was like some sort of hot yoga. I started with like a Bikram and a Vinyasa
Hmm.
yoga, and
Hmm.
I thought that was yoga. I didn't realize until actually my girlfriend who introduced me. She's a longtime yoga teacher and Reiki healer, and she introduced me to this whole nother world of yoga, like all these different styles and branches,
Mm.
and it really opened my eyes up. I was like, one, it made it fresh, so like I could try
Hmm.
different styles and kind of find my own style. But two, it opened my eyes up into like all the different modalities for different purposes. Like if somebody's listening now and they have trouble sleeping, try
Mm.
yin yoga, restorative yoga, yoga
Like,
nidra, and
yeah.
you'll be passed out. You'll have the best night's
Yeah,
sleep ever if you've never
totally.
tried it before. And there's so many different styles, and yeah, like a hatha practice or a practice. Actually, I know it gets a bad rap of Bikram, but like basically, it's a very it's not a vinyasa. It's just a style that has different postures, and you go from one to the next. And I feel like starting that way when I started practicing
Hmm.
many years ago was that it allowed me to really take my time and perfect each pose and really be mindful and aware
Right.
of my body. And at the
Hmm.
same time, like you mentioned, it's just like the whole pose is for longer, but that's not easy at all. Like, I mean, if you ever try
No.
holding a plank for more than a few minutes, like it's hard and you build this dense muscle and you find and if you're more aware and you're utilizing your core and all the proper muscles
Hmm.
and engagement, I mean, you gotta work out. You'll find core muscles you've never found
Yeah,
before.
totally.
I mean, look at
Hmm.
gymnastics. Like they're all body weight stuff, and they hold poses for long
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
totally.
So I 100% agree. And I have another quote from your website. I love the language on your
Hmm.
website, also on your Instagram. So everyone listening, definitely check Michelle out on Instagram, Yogi Shelly on Instagram,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, you have some nice quotes. So, um, so again, from your website, yoga makes me question everything. Look at everything with new eyes and a new perspective to find growth. I've learned through years of trial and error on this path that when I'm confused or uncertain, it's because I'm out of touch not only with my deep self, but also with my emotional temperature. Practicing
Hmm.
centers me into inserting awareness for self inquiry. I love to share the practice with others to navigate as a community society's external situations by tapping into the internal vast space within ourselves.
Hmm.
And I love how you put that. And that kind of led me down to the question of what tools do you use to get back in touch with yourself?
Definitely breath. I mean, breath work. I mean, again, just keeping it simple. I mean, especially during, this quarantine. Um, and I did a lot of like walking meditations during quarantine. I would listen to like a teacher that I liked and walked. But yeah, I mean, I feel like whenever we hit a speed bump, whatever it may be, a breakup or losing somebody or coronavirus stuff, I always find I always run back to the practice and kind of not try to change it, but just look for new things to discover. I mean, it's like it's never ending what you can learn, which is so beautiful about it. Really, it's never ending. I mean, they're never ending till what we can learn about this universe and like our connection to the cosmos and through meditation. I've never been into this enlightened state or samadhi. Hopefully one day I will. I mean, but it's really intriguing. And I think, us as urban yogis or meditators, whatever you want to call it, sometimes we're hard on ourselves, but we have it more challenging. And I hope that people they're not so hard on themselves, because if you're a monk in the Himalayas, I mean, I've been up there. Like, there's no distractions around. You're a monk chilling in the Himalayas in nature. There's no TV. There's no nothing to distract you. That they're not married, so their meditation practices are much easier. Like, we have to integrate, in our relationships, in our lives, with our family and work. So we have to kind of give ourselves a pat on the back, because it's going to be more challenging for us because we have more distractions, but that's why it's, I think, also so necessary. I totally forget the original question, but
No,
hopefully I answered it.
yeah, no, that's great. I really never thought about that in that terms, where it's like, it's so true. It's such different environments, and there's not really a comparison in only the terms where if it works in either environment, in things like breath work, meditation, sound baths, like we were talking about.
Mm.
And is there anything else that you particularly use? Are you a fan of mantras? Are you have a particular way of doing self inquiry, which is a big part of yoga?
Mm.
Do you have any specific things that you use?
Yeah, I like just some like mantras I use sometimes. And my friend, who's a brilliant mantra teacher, she'll give like a mantra for a specific event in life or whatever a person may be going through. Then you use that for 40 days. So I do like those like 40-day practices. But again, I've also been gravitating towards the gene keys. I don't know if you've heard of that.
The what?
Gene keys.
No, I haven't heard of that. Yeah.
It's like all of the spiritual practices combined, and it's
Hmm.
a contemplative, like deeply, if you like contemplation, really going into like shadow work, contemplation and meditation. It's really beautiful, and it's very cool meditation practices. But it will have you dig up some stuff and face it, which I also really like, because we don't realize what we hold in the body. And I think modern yoga, it's like wants to pull this stuff out. I mean, that to become, because all of this stuff that we're storing, we become dense, we become heavy. And I think that heaviness that's released, that's what becoming light is. So if we think about the word enlightenment, we are in a sense on that path of becoming lighter, enlightenment. So when we can release all that heaviness, that density, or traumas that we're storing, or heartaches, or whatever it is, I think we're in the right direction. I think, and it's, we're always evolving and growing. I mean, sometimes I feel like, oh yeah, I'm so good right now, I'm centered. And then the universe gives us something, boom, oh yeah, you think you're centered, it's grounded. Now let's see how you handle this. And then you got to it's like, oh my God, I got to start over. I feel like my world is shaken, and you go back to the practice. So it's never like, I don't even like to say I'm like, I haven't mastered anything. And I think that's the exciting part. There's always something to discover.
Yeah, definitely. That gene key sounds fascinating. I want to check it out, definitely. And I'll put that in the show notes for everyone if
Mm-hmm.
I find any information on that. Is there any
Mm-hmm.
particular, is it just called Gene Keys, or is there any particular like site or place that
Well,
you
yeah,
practice?
there's, I think there's a genekeys.com, but there's like, it's a book and then it gives you different contemplations and meditations. I think they have a few complimentary ones on YouTube. But the idea is that you do the whole program. And, but you know, if you listen to some of the ones on YouTube and it calls you, it might be worth diving into.
Okay,
It's, yeah, it's cool. I like
cool.
it.
Awesome. And so, Michelle, you've traveled a lot through being a teacher and a student. Over time, you must have seen some commonalities and differences in spiritual practices
Mm-hmm.
and other practices from different people you've met and places you've been. What
Mm-hmm.
form of practices do you seem to be the most, or do you see to be the most effective, or things that make people have a positive outlook on life? And that could be anything from like having a sense of community to particular diets, maybe meditation or a daily prayer practice or Pacific yoga practice or breath work. Any commonalities you see that maybe we're not incorporating now that we can incorporate or pay more attention to?
Hmm. I think, well, yeah, I mean, like diet, that's a whole other conversation. I believe that what we put in our bodies is super important.
Yeah.
But traveling, it's more, I think the common thread ties it all together is like the devotion to the practice or to like knowing yourselves. And I think if we can just take that quality in whatever we do, like just be devoted to yourself, getting yourself healthy, getting yourself grounded, more clear. I think that is a quality to cultivate in whatever practice you do. But yeah, I mean, and I think once you start to do the practice, you'll notice like, oh, well, I don't, I don't really feel like pizza and chips and beer, like you know. And then your body will, your as your mind gets clear, your body gets clean. Like you won't want those things that will also help clean out your physical system. So something that. So what was the original question again?
Yeah, I mean,
It was
devotion
something.
answer that it's like the commonalities and differences in spiritual practices and other
Yeah,
practices from the different people you've met over your travels.
yeah.
And devotion sounds like, I mean, something that we always talk about on the show, which is consistency. And it's
Mm-hmm.
consistency and patience. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like stuff will shift in the way where you put your energy is
Mm-hmm.
over time, your body, your mind, your world shifts towards that. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it might be when you least expect it, but it always ends
Mm-hmm.
up going where you put your energy. So make those actions. I always say your actions are contagious, so make them good ones.
Yeah, for sure. I like
And
that.
yeah, and utilize the tools and things like that, and even the mantra. This show is technically, well, the secret yogi. The idea of the secret yogi was supposed to be a mantra. So basically, it's I
Mm,
am a secret yogi. I am somebody. I have this superhero within, and
mm,
these tools that we're talking about, yoga, meditation, breath work, help us embody them. So
mm-hmm.
it's like staying consistent to that. And whenever you have doubt, like kind of going back, it doesn't have to be I am a secret yogi. It's just one that
Mm-hmm.
I've found that works. I actually found it with my niece and my nephew, and it really
Aw,
resonated with them. They're 4 and 7. So, and I'm
yeah,
like, if it works for kids, it works for adults, and they loved it anytime that I got them to practice yoga through that. So
yeah. And I
whatever
think
works for you.
also, you know, people also think like, oh, if I am a yogi, I can't do this or can't do that. I think don't lose yourself also. I mean, let
Mhm.
go of the parts of you that you don't serve you, but you know, be you. Don't buy into the hype. I mean, you see these people with like mala beads and these like
Yep.
wizard cloaks, and it's like a lot of it's for show. And you know, you can still be you. You can still, you know, once in a while go out, have a good time, or you know, do the normal things. Everything's, oh, if you're a yogi, you know, I eat fish, you know, and people are like, oh, but I thought you were a yogi. I'm like, yes. I was like, but I just feel at this moment my body needs fish. So
Mhm.
there's no really rules. I mean, yeah, if you stick to like a very strict lineage, and if we're going by the textbook, there are kind of rules. But I think there's like all this other stuff going on that we see like on social media, that like we have to look or be a certain way or dress a certain way. And that's all like the nonsense.
Hmm.
So I think you don't have to lose yourself or dress a certain way or look a certain way or be vegan right away. If you practice yoga, like you'll feel more into what is feeding your soul, and you'll go with that. I think so whatever, however we've like
Yeah.
personified this yogi image, I think don't plug into that. Just feel into your own body and go with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the audience of the show. It's not people who want to embody the stereotypical yogi. I mean, if that's something that you want to do and you want to embrace, I mean, first have some self-reflection and say, like, is it my ego
Mm-hmm.
telling me this? And a lot of times
Mm.
you mentioned it, like where it's like, I've seen comments on Instagram and Facebook where it's somebody who is a very well-known yoga teacher and has a large following, and they mention, "Oh, I eat fish or I eat meat," and they'll lose like a whole bunch of followers. I can't believe
Oh
you did
yeah.
this, and it's like it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy, and that's not what
It's
it.
crazy.
That's the total opposite of what yoga is. And yes,
Right.
certain textbooks, but I mean, in the whole philosophy of this show is that it's really anything like the asanas. In my opinion, like there's so many different practices, and it's really just moving any movement with mindfulness, awareness, and fusing
Mm-hmm.
breath. And to me,
Mm-hmm.
that is sometimes I have a more heavy calisthenics practice. I feel that suits my
Uh-huh.
body on certain days, and
Right.
I'm going about it with very mindfulness, just like I would do any other yoga asana, like a warrior two
Yeah.
or any other type of pose. And I'm going into that with such awareness and mindfulness. And yeah, so I really wanted to make this a community where there's none of those hard rules. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're not allowed in this secret yogi society.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I feel like
exactly.
we're on the same page. So that's also awesome. And we're just open for
Yeah.
kindness, peace, compassion, and a loving community. So I want
Right.
to be conscious of your time. So I just have a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next for you in your teachings, your learnings, entrepreneurship, and ultimately following your dharma and keeping things new and exciting?
Well, now that travel is a little bit limited, but I think my passion really is like education. I mean, I teach teacher trainings as well, and I'm right in the middle of a sound apprentice program that we kind of had to move online. But I think really educating people on the roots and the foundations to honor the lineages that they came from, because I mean, what's happening now, and it's by no fault of anybody, it just is what it is. People are, studios and teachers are spitting out these teacher trainings that have no connection to any of the texts or the lineages or the practices. They're just basically, okay, here's the sequence, teach it, and they become fitness teachers. So I think there needs to be a re-education, and that's where my passion is. And really, I'm in the sound apprentice program. I'm teaching it, and I honor and respect my teacher in Nepal. And I was given the blessings to teach what he taught me to this group, and that's really important. Like, I'm not just like making this stuff up out of thin air. Like, I want to honor those lineages. So that's where I'm headed, continue with the education. And then, of course, I do yoga retreats. This next one is in Asheville in November. It's going to be a yoga and sound retreat. And I have people signed up, so I think it's a go. But yeah, anything I can absorb from other cultures or even shamanic cultures, I'm super drawn to, or I can, because it's all like the same, but different, like all of these shamanic cultures and cultures in the East, like they get it, and they're saying the same thing, but just in a different way.
Hmm.
So that's what really inspires me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think there's so much room to kind of re-sprout that education into what yoga truly is beyond just the physical practice, these sequences, and we're gonna run this franchise um,
Mm,
and yeah, like a yoga teacher. I mean, that's totally fine, but it's nice to have that other end of the spectrum with
for sure.
yeah, like what you're teaching, and it's very meaningful and it's very good. And at the same time, like having these type of conversation where you introduce people that would not otherwise been introduced to it, and we put it in terms that are easily digestible, and you don't have to go spend 200 hours or 300 hours going through a training, but you could still get the same messages and the deep meaning. And in short, and if it's something that you really interest you and you want to dive further in, of course, there's tons of information out there. And as for information that you're teaching, where can people stay up to date with what you're doing and anything you're working on? Is it your website? Is it Instagram? Is it all those? Where's the best place?
Yeah, I think Instagram. And I also have a bunch of free complimentary classes on YouTube and sound meditations. So those are really nice to listen to with headphones. And then there's a few practices in there as well. So if you're curious about sound, my YouTube channel is Michelle Berlin. And then, yeah, mostly all like the up-to-date stuff. If I do like a Zoom class or retreats, it's on my website and my Instagram. Yeah.
Cool. And your Instagram's Yoga Shelly, at Yoga Shelly on Instagram. And website is www.yogishelly.com, which will all be in the show notes below if you want an easy hyperlinked version to check that out. And also attached with this episode and an adjoining episode, the next episode, you were kind enough to do an interactive practice. So that'll be a guided meditation or a sound healing.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So I really appreciate that. And before we bring this episode to a close, I have to quote you again one last time. And I know this. I know this is originally from David McCullough Jr., a high school English teacher, as he delivered his commencement speech to students. I love how you shared this on your Instagram post, and it's: climb the mountains so you can see the world, not so the world can see you. And for everyone listening, as you go about the rest of your day and into the next, I think about this message. And David then goes on to say, climb a mountain, not to plant your flag, but to embrace the challenge and enjoy the air and behold the view. So thank you, Michelle, for joining us today. And everyone listening, make sure to check out the next episode, which is a guided sound therapy meditation by no other than Michelle herself, and enjoy this great journey of life. Oh, and if you like this episode, please leave a written review and a rating wherever you're listening to it right now. And also make sure to check out www.secretyogisociety.com. Michelle, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. And I really appreciate it, and I'm grateful for you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun. I love to geek out on yoga stuff. So
I'm a secret yogi and I do warrior too. I'm Landon. I'm a secret yogi. I do warrior too.
That was my niece and nephew, and they're embodying their secret yogis too through the tools of yoga, meditation, breath work, energy work, and related practices. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode, and I hope you really enjoyed this conversation. If you enjoyed it and are embodying your inner secret yogi, the best way to support this show is to leave a written review and rating wherever you're listening right now. Also, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at www.secretyogisociety.com and enjoy the rest of your day and have an extraordinary day.